Thank you. Okay, so like I said, we're in chapter 19, Genesis 19. If you don't have your Bible, grab a pew Bible. We have a lot to get through tonight. So, while the narratives of chapter 18 and 19 tie together really nicely, the themes couldn't be any more contrasting, okay? Let me just start tonight by saying chapter 19 is very dark. It's intense. So there's a lot of things we're going to talk about that are, not things that we typically study. At least I haven't. So it's going to be interesting, but I hope that it can be beneficial. And I know that it will be. The things that we'll talk about, the lessons we can take away from this chapter are beneficial. Let me just say that from the start, though the story is intense. There's a reason why the Lord sent his angels to visit Sodom, okay? The events involving Lot and his family and Sodom and what they're involved in, the outcry that's come against Sodom at this time. Obviously, the Lord heard those outcries and is doing something about it, as we're going to soon find out. There's a reason why the Lord has come to Sodom, and the judgment is imminent at this point. So we'll study a few things about Lot and see how much his life has changed since we last interacted with him. I think it was 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. It's been a while. His life has changed completely from when he was with Abraham. But without further ado, let's get right into the text. So I'm going to start reading verse 1. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." They said, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." But he pressed them strongly. So they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Okay, so we'll stop right there. A lot to unpack right here just in this very small section. Okay, so again, the story picks up right where we left off in chapter 18. The angels have come to Sodom. They've arrived. And again, this is the setting of where we're at. Same map that was shown on Sunday. The right is this area that's now completely desolate, but just imagine it being a more fertile land at that time, because it was. That's why Lot originally wanted to go there. So again, this is the setting of where we're at. Just a reminder, okay? So again, the angels arrive and Lot is at the city gate waiting for them, okay? So interesting to note, Lot being at the city gate, this would have shown that he had some sort of influence, some maybe authority, okay? But not just anybody could be at the city gates at this time in this culture, right? This would have been someone with authority, okay? So he gets up, he greets them. This would have been a place where elders and leaders of the cities would have been gathered, right? So he has some sort of public standing, but we'll see soon whether that public standing is able to achieve any results as the story goes on. Verse 2, Lot invites the men to come to his house, men being angels, right? So he thinks they're men, same as Abraham. He didn't know they were angels. He doesn't know that they're angels either, okay? He sees them as men. He doesn't treat them any differently because they are divine beings, okay? They're just men, and he's trying to be hospitable to them. Now, I don't think the angels saying no is any correlation to Lot himself or his character. Purely speculating here, but not speculating, right? There, in the commentary I was reading, one of the things that it said was travelers in this day would have been more inclined to live in the city, sit in the city square, stay in the city square rather than at someone's house, right? They would have come prepared to do that. They would not have expected a citizen to invite them into their home. They would have been camping between in the wilderness, and they would have been staying in the city square, okay? So another subtle observation here, Lot has a house. He lives in a city. When we're introduced to Lot, where's he living? Tents in the wilderness, right? He has herds. So he lives in the wilderness. He's out in the, maybe not wilderness, that may not be the right word, but he lives outdoors. He's not in a city, right? A nomad. He's living a nomadic lifestyle, okay? So he's not anymore. So much has changed since we last interacted with Lot, like I said. The initial reason for Lot coming to this area was because it was a fertile land, right? Remember, when he separates from Abraham, well, why did he? Someone answer. Why did he separate from Abraham? Not Josh and not Kevin. Exactly. Okay. Their flocks were too big, clearly rich, a lot of possessions, right? At that time, if you had a lot of herds, a lot of animals, you were rich in that time, right? They were so rich that they had to separate themselves from each other. And Lot went this way. Abraham's like, let there not be a feud between us. You go whichever way you want to go. I'll go the other way. I just want to keep peace with you. You're my nephew. You're my kinsman. So he goes this way. Abraham goes the other way, right? This is where Lot comes. So he's not living a nomadic lifestyle. We don't know if he has herds. Maybe he still has them, and I'm just totally speculating here. But we're not said anything about those, right? He's living in a house, in a city, an ungodly city at that, as we come to find out. But again, just interesting to note there. Verse 3, Lot presses them strongly after they say, no, we'll just stay in the city square, almost as if Lot is inviting them because he knows, no, that tradition isn't a safe practice here in Sodom. You're not going to want to you're not going to want to stay the night in the city square here. Please come stay with me. I'm begging you, right? I can almost hear him saying it. So he may know what happens to those that stay in the town square of Sodom, right? Also note, very subtle, no significance here, but the unleavened bread being included in Lot's meal here, to me shows this is a quick and basic meal, very different than the meal we get from Abraham in the previous chapter. So maybe rushed, maybe chaotic, right? Kind of setting up a chaotic scene here. Regardless, though, he hosts them, he gives them a meal, he's hospitable, just like his uncle was, not discounting that whatsoever, okay? So, verses 4 through 7, but before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people, to the last man, surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them. Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. And I'll just keep reading the next two verses if you have your Bible open. I couldn't fit it all in the slides. But verse 8 and 9, behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, stand back. And they said, this fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge now. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. Okay? So things are getting intense here, like I said, right? This is where the story picks up intensity. So in verse 5, before everyone goes to bed, all the men of Sodom are gathered at Lot's house. Okay? Inquiring where his visitors are. They tell him, bring him out to us. We want to know them. This is certainly, if you're left wondering, this is in a sexual way, okay? So they want to rape Lot's visitors, okay? So we immediately begin to see, just 5 verses in, why the Lord has come to Sodom, okay? So as mentioned in chapter 18, the outcries come against Sodom. God is coming to investigate that and see for himself. He didn't need to do that. He was all-knowing, all-powerful, but again, just another testament to God's patience, long-suffering for men, that he's willing to go down and interact with men to give them one last chance to be right in his eyes. So the act of sodomy obviously gets his name from this place, Sodom. It was a capital offense under the law of Moses. It's condemned in the Old and New Testaments, Leviticus 18, Romans 1, 1 Timothy 1, several other passages as well. So this is a vile offense in God's eyes. Verse 6 and 7, Lot goes out to speak with the men, shuts the door behind him, right? So I think this is a testament to his protection mentality. He wants to protect his visitors. Don't do this. I'm begging you. Do not act so wickedly, right? He's trying to protect his visitors and trying to, get his fellow citizens to not act in this way, right? So Lot offers up his daughters to protect his visitors. Verse 8, right?
Why did he protect visitors and not his daughters?
We're going to get to that. That's a great question. So Lot shows courage in trying to protect his visitors, right? But what does he do? In the meantime, with his own daughters, he puts them in harm's way, right? Very interesting. And we find ourselves in a conundrum here, right? So many struggle with the fact, and Josh and I were talking about this past week as I was prepping for this and he was prepping the material. Many struggle with the fact that Lot offers up his daughters in this way, and then when we get to 2 Peter later, he's referred to as a righteous man twice by Peter, right? So, and he's saved. He's the only person in his family that are saved from this calamity, right? I'm skipping ahead. But one view is that maybe Lot saw hospitality in this time, hospitality of strangers is more important than the well-being of his family. That would be quite a bizarre viewpoint. That's one of the things that I saw. And then another was, some people think that he didn't think the men would harm his daughters because they were fellow Sodomites. They were engaged to men of Sodom, as we come to find out later. But regardless, Lot has offered up his daughters in a very heinous way. Definitely hard to see his integrity in this situation. Josh?
It's important to remember when we read these kinds of accounts and the similar account, for instance, in Judges 19, these are included not as, oh, look how good it is that Lot is trying to protect this is a terrible thing that he's doing. Yeah. He may be trying to rescue a bad situation, but it's a terrible situation. And of course, why is he in this situation?
Yeah. Yeah. So Josh is exactly right? It's Lot has put himself in this situation by living here. He's found himself in this very situation, right? Did he not know? Was he living under a rock? He didn't know that the fellow Sodomites were evil people. Of course he knew that.
But don't you think that he probably knew they didn't want women, they wanted the men?
That's another possibility.
So
Yeah.
he knew that, and he thought, well, they won't mess with them because they don't want them.
Yeah. So almost a pointless compromise, right? It's like they wouldn't have wanted it. So yeah, so many possibilities, but the point remains, Lot does a very heinous thing by offering up, his daughters in this way, but in a weird way to protect his visitors. Just a very odd situation, right? So just so much chaos ensuing. We're 9 verses in here, and Lot has already made us question his character in a few different ways. Yeah, JD.
Going back to Peter, talking about Lot as a righteous man, as the narrative unfolds, or other narratives of other characters, let's take Moses for example. These characters, these people are human as well. Are they righteous from age 5 through age 150? They do all the right things every single time? No, but their faith grows over time, and you see their attitudes change. You look at how Jacob is describing Isaac's God. Hey, this is your God, and over time it's his God, and he develops a character that's right over time. So Lot's not making right decisions right now.
Yeah.
Where he was at affected his decision making.
Yeah.
And over time, obviously Peter calls him a righteous man. So I think we need to look at that as we read these accounts.
Yeah, agreed. And we're going to talk more about that later for sure. JD makes a great point that it's hard to see it right now, but he is considered a righteous man, as we come to find out later in 2 Peter. So we'll study that here more in a minute. So again, I want to highlight the fact, verse 9, the men are not willing to compromise. They're not relenting. Ultimately, we see that Lot's standing, if there was some standing that he possessed by being at the city gate, it doesn't bring much fruit. It doesn't provide any results. Okay, so Lot not able to persuade his fellow Sodomites. Yes, sir.
In verse 1, we established, it mentioned that he didn't know they were angels, but he knew there was something special about him.
Yeah.
Because he bowed himself to the ground in front of them and immediately invited them into his home.
Yeah.
So he knew there was some They were either princely looking, or royal looking, or something was up, because he knew
Yeah.
he got about to.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It would have been, it's nice to know, it would have been nice to know what was it that kind of made him act in this way. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely interesting to think about. So we'll get into the next section here. Let's read verses 10 through 14. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out, groping the door. Then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of this place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. Okay? So as soon as the situation starts to spiral out of control here, Lot is not prevailing with the Sodomites. They're about to attack him too, and the angels have to save him. So Lot, doing his best to de-escalate this situation, has enraged his fellow citizens into a fury, offered up his daughters to be raped, and ironically required saving himself by his own visitors that he was trying to save. Okay? So just a very odd story here. Just the ultimate irony and ultimately disgusting of what's happening, right? It just goes to show why God came here to destroy this place. And then we see the angels get right down to business here, right? Their first and only night here in Sodom. We're going to destroy this place. We gave it a chance. It's not happening. We're destroying this place. God gave us the authority to do so. Verse 11, note a rare word for blindness here, similar to the word used for Saul on the road to Damascus. This is not just the straight word for blindness, like they were not blinded forever. As far as the word usage goes, they very well could have been blinded. Regardless, it's just it's a rare usage of the word blindness there in Hebrew. But doesn't matter. The men lose their vision for long enough that Lot and the angels can get back inside to safety and start making a plan for what they're going to do next. Okay. Any comments or questions before I go any further? I know I'm talking really fast. Okay. Yes.
I think there's one thing also that's easy to forget is like Lot. We question his response to the mob, which I think rightfully so. It's not a good response in any respect, but it was probably like really terrifying to be presented with this mob of angry and incensed men that are knocking down your door, basically. And he'd been surrounded by such a perverse society for so long. His natural instinct was like, that's probably what drove him to such a terrible response and stuff. But I think like we were saying, he is righteous, and in his heart he knows what is right. He just was like
panicked.
The situation brought him to that.
Yeah, almost as if he was acting in panic, right? His instincts didn't pay him off very well, right? But yeah, no, good point. Good point. So Genesis, 12 through 14. Then the men said to Lot, I'm sorry, I already read this section. So Lot is told to seek out any family members he can save from the destruction. God's investigation from 18 verse 21 is now full circle. Sodom's verdict is guilty. The judgment is imminent. Okay, so didn't take very long to come to that conclusion. Lot is clearly convicted by the angel's message. There's no questioning. He immediately gets up, right? After they say, this city's going to be destroyed. It's too late. Probably because of the experience he has just endured, would have been easily convicted by this message. Doesn't plead, doesn't argue, just immediately gets up and runs to his sons-in-law's house, okay? And tries to convince them that we have to leave. They don't believe him, of course. They think he's joking. Maybe they think he's drunk. The text just says that they think he's kidding. But again, Lot's influence or lack thereof is not being portrayed in a positive light in chapter 19 so far. Couldn't convince his sons-in-laws to believe him that this was going to happen, even visiting them in the night. Notice that it is in the night, in a panic, probably. So just interesting to note. Yeah. Did you have a comment? Okay, you're good. So, I'm sorry. We're going to get there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't say that he gets up and runs. I'm speculating there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. They did have to tell him. Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to get to that too, where they pull him out of the city, right? So that's a good point, right? He's told to do this. So he doesn't deserve the credit for going to, like, if you have any other family members, go save them, right? Oh yeah, that's a great idea, right? Maybe some selfishness there that he has to be told to do that. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. So let's get into the next section, verse 15 through 22. We'll read that very quickly. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city." But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. And as they brought them out, one said, "Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Behold, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." He said to him, "Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there." Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. Okay. So again, we see the angels urge Lot to leave. The punishment of Sodom is coming. Whether you're here or not, we got to get you out of here. It's a final warning to get out, right? But of course, what does he do? As Michelle mentioned, he lingers. He's hanging out. I'm not so motivated to leave, right? The angels are like, we got to get out of here. Just the previous night, he was trying to convince his sons-in-law to leave the town. Now he's not motivated to leave. Maybe he never was motivated to leave. But again, the angels can tarry no longer, so they literally have to grab Lot, drag him out of the town and his family so they can enact God's will here. Verse 17, "Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley." As we know, will come later where that becomes an important note. And then in verse 18, obviously Lot was reluctant to leave, had to be forcibly removed from the destruction, and now he's bartering with the angels about where he's going to go. They tell him, go here. This is where you'll be safe. And he's like, how about I go here instead, right? It's like, really? These are the guys that are saving your life, and you're going to try to barter with them and tell them where you want to go? And he says out of fear, I'm afraid to go there. I want to go here instead, right? And it's just a little city. Let me go there. It's little, God, or angels. So, I don't know. Is there any significance in him saying it's a little town? It's not like Sodom. They're not evil. I know those people. Doesn't really matter. It's just odd that he's arguing with his rescuers about where he's going to end up. Just a very bizarre story here with Lot, and continues to get more and more bizarre as we read even further. So the town where he goes, Zoar, literally means little. So calls it little. We'll go to this little town, Zoar. Yeah, Mike, do you have something?
Yeah, the whole reason for this episode is that God has heard outcry. And it says, chapter 18, verse 20, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great. And then in chapter 19, verse 13, their outcry has become so great before the Lord. And I'm just wondering, who is crying out to the Lord? Because these cities are wicked, full of wicked people. I don't think they're crying out for help from the Lord. So it leaves Lot, maybe his family, to cry out. But it says outcry was exceedingly great. Could it have been from surrounding towns like this little town Zoar that wasn't wicked, perhaps?
Maybe.
And people knew of the wickedness in the big cities?
Yeah, maybe. Interesting to think about. But to answer your question, I would say probably just other people in the region that would have heard and known what was going on. And I can't help but think about Abraham still trying to intercede on behalf of Sodom, even though he probably knew how wicked of a town it was. And maybe he didn't. But it is interesting to think about who was it that was outcrying. But clearly there were people that were, that know about what's going on here. So, again, the patience of God is the theme of this entire story, right? God continues to be patient and merciful towards Lot. His patience with Sodom has run out. The angels grant Lot's request, say, fine, you can go there instead, but just, you got to hurry because we've got to do this. We can't delay any longer. So get to where you're going, and then we'll be able to do what we're going to do, right? So this is the passage that we've been talking about quite a bit so far, the reference to Lot in the New Testament, 2 Peter 2, 6 through 9. If by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, being greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment. Okay? So ultimately, Sodom is an example of what will happen to the ungodly if they don't show repentance for their sins. But also, God knows how to rescue the godly from trials because of the ungodly. Okay, so that's how Lot gets tied in here. Regardless of our thoughts on his righteousness or unrighteousness, he was righteous in God's eyes to the point of being saved. But God saves him from this unrighteous place. And I think that's the main point here, that the influence of Sodom has corrupted his family, and we'll soon see that. And he has to be saved from it. So, again, like we've talked about already, many struggle to see the righteousness of Lot in this story coming up to this point, and then especially after this point. But Peter calls him righteous, and I'm not going to argue with Peter. So he's righteous. Any thoughts or comments, questions? Yeah, Josh.
It is interesting that both times that Peter refers him as righteous, he puts it in the context of his soul was distressed. And I think you see that in Genesis 19. He is concerned for the men. He does not want them to stay in the city square. He tries to rescue them from the mob.
Yeah.
So he's clearly distressed by the wickedness.
Yeah.
It does not take away from the points you're making. Why does he move his family there? Why does he get comfortable there?
Yeah.
So he's not a perfect man by any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination. He is righteous, though, in the sense that he has retained his moral compass, if you will, at least when it comes in regards to these matters.
Yeah, I won't try to regurgitate that. That was well said, but I agree completely. He has a conscience, for sure. So ultimate point there is God is patient and can rescue the godly from trials. Okay, that's the main point to take away from the 2 Peter 2 text. So we have about 10 minutes left. Perfect. So let's get into the next part here, verse 24 through 26. Then the Lord rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. and he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Okay? So God brings his judgment, sulfur and fire, fire and brimstone, depending on your translation, comes down, destroys the cities, destroys the valley, destroys every living being, the animals, the vegetation. This entire region is destroyed by this fire. No one survives. Again, it was very similar to the flood story, where several people are saved from a destruction of an area, but flood obviously being global. But in 2 Peter 2, I didn't have this up there, but the previous verse talks about Noah. Okay, so goes from Noah straight into Lot in Peter's account there. So I thought that was interesting. So found a couple pictures online. So the left one, you may be like, what's that? That's not fire. It is. So burning sulfur actually emits a blue flame. Okay, it's called blue lava. It's an odd phenomenon. So maybe the picture on the right where we commonly get our artwork of the fire, the red fire, right, is not maybe accurate. But regardless, in my mind, I like to imagine the blue fire in the red situation. Okay, so however you envision it, doesn't really matter. God destroys the area, destroys everything, kills all the people. The wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah are no more. Okay, but sorry, I might have gone engineering there. Too technical, sorry. But I just thought that was cool. Another interesting thing here is Sodom and this area, this region was very fertile, right? This is why Lot came here, like we talked about. Not anymore. Nothing's going to grow here any longer. And this area still to this day is not a fertile region at all. I believe it's part of Syria? No. Jordan? I don't know. That region, right? It's desert. It's basically desert. So nothing grows there to this day, right? And a lot of that area is like this, right? It's no longer fertile like it was once in the time of these people. So anyway, just thought this was a cool picture. So another thing to think about, right, is this would have been very clearly visible to everyone in the region, right? Seeing whether it was red fire or blue fire or whatever, it's engulfing this entire area, and the whole area is getting destroyed. One day there was a city, the next day there's a fire, right? So anyone in the region, kind of back to what Mike was saying, who were the people that were outcrying? Well, the people that might have been outcrying to God and praying about the unrighteousness would have seen this. Like, oh wow, I guess they're not going to bother us anymore, right? So interesting to think about. Maybe the judgment of Sodom wasn't just a judgment on them, but a visual warning to others that would have seen this. And we know as we move on, Abraham himself sees the fire. So we'll talk about that here in a moment. But notice in verse 26, Lot's wife behind him turns back and becomes a pillar of salt. We do have a Lot's wife reference to in the New Testament as well, Luke chapter 17. Likewise, just as it was in the days of Lot, they were eating and drinking and buying and selling, planting and building. But on the day when Lot went out of Sodom, fire and sulfur rained from heaven and destroyed them all. So will it be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. On that day, let the one who is on the housetop with his goods in the house not come down to take them away. And likewise, let the one who's in the field not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Okay, so she gets a unfortunate shout out there by Christ. So again, the angels told Lot's family not to turn around. She doesn't listen, doesn't obey, and she's punished for that. She's behind Lot. Makes you wonder if she would have been in front. Would she have turned around? Don't know, totally speculating, but regardless, Lot has lost his wife. Okay, so already we had 4. Now we're down to 3, right? 3 saved from the destruction. Verse 27 through 29, we get back to Abraham. Won't read that, but out of sake of time, if you read that, you'll see basically he goes down to the same place where he stood and talked to God and intercedes on behalf of Sodom, and successfully intercedes on behalf of Sodom. But unfortunately, Sodom doesn't do their part because the other part of the agreement from God was there had to be righteous people to save. and there were not enough righteous people to save, so God's judgment was not spared. So Abraham, again, does see it. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and saw, and toward all the land of the valley he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. And God destroyed those cities, right? So it's a done deal now. So God remembered Noah, verse 29. This is why Lot was saved. He was the righteous family. His family was the righteous family that God had in mind. There was no one else that was going to be saved, not even his sons-in-law. That would have only got him up to 6 if those 2 would have come with him. But again, God's long-suffering with Sodom continues to be the theme here, but that long-suffering comes to an end, as we see. So we'll summarize verses 30 through 38. Again, we don't have time to get through all of it, but Lot's ending, he ends up living in Zoar, the little city, out of fear. Fear drove him to live in Zoar, and now fear has driven him to live in a cave. So he doesn't live in Zoar for very long. We don't know how long it transpires between the previous section and verse 30. He's not living in Zoar anymore. So all that fuss for nothing. So this is a very sad reversal to the legacy of Lot. When we're introduced to him, he's got land, he's got servants, he's got herds, he's very wealthy. Now he's lost his wife, he's lost his house, he's lost his herds, he's lost his city, his sons-in-laws, and he's got his daughters, and he lives in a cave, right? So just a very unfortunate ending so far that we see. We don't have the end of his life, but his split from Abraham because of his herds ends up being his undoing in his life, it almost seems. And the negative influences that he endures in Sodom, definitely not ideal. So his daughters are still with him. Remember, they are spouseless. They don't have, their sons-in-law were just destroyed. They don't have any heirs. So they have a great idea. Let's get our father drunk and we'll sleep with him and conceive children. So Josh made a good point in the material. If you have the hard copy, the second mention of alcohol in Scripture is also shown in a negative light, just like the first usage with Noah. Okay, drunkenness, and it leads him to commit incest with his daughters. Right. So this is the map. Right. It's on the other side of the Dead Sea from Israel. Ammon is one of the ancestors that comes from Lot's children that are born out of incest. Ben-Ami, who is the father of the Ammonites, and then Moab, who is the father of the Moabites there. Both of these descendants of Lot would be thorns in the side of Israel, basically for the rest of biblical times. So, of course, the influence of Sodom continues to live on through those areas and those people. So we'll get into some final applications. Evil influences corrupt good morals. We are in the world, but we must not be of the world. God is patient, but he will not overlook abominations. I kind of talked about that on Sunday. Judgment can be both cataclysmic in the case of Sodom and also gradual in the case of Lot, Lot's family. And we shouldn't turn back from what God has taken us away from. Anybody have any final thoughts or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I just think it's interesting that he was told to go to the hills, and then he bickered with them. And then once Sodom and Gomorrah was gone, his wife was gone, he's like, oh, I think I'll go to the hills.
Yeah. It's almost like they knew what was best for him all along, right? Very interesting. Yes, ma'am.
Ezekiel 16, 48, it's talking about Jerusalem.
Okay.
It's adultery, but basically, as I live, says the Lord, neither your sister Sodom has done as you have done. Look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom, and it says that she had pride, fullness of food, abundance of idleness. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy, and they were haughty and committed abominations before me, and therefore I took their ways as I saw fit. I heard a preacher once say that because they did not take care of the poor and needy, that's why God is taking the people of Sodom and disregarded the abomination part.
Interesting.
And that's
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's interesting. We are out of time. Thank you for your thoughts. We are covering chapter 20 on Sunday. Kevin is leading that discussion. Thank you for your time.